What's going on YouTube? My name is Ginge TCG or Chris, and today I'm back showcasing a Crustle masterclass. I was doing a little bit of research on Crustle in my own time because this is a deck I truly love, and I realized that there is like a severe lack of content for this deck. And I did stream it recently, and people seem to have a ton of fun with it. I have changed the list a little bit since that stream, so I figured, you know what, let me just make a little masterclass that I could throw up on the Draw Pass TCG channel or and my own personal channel. If you're watching this on Draw Pass TCG, welcome. It's my competitive TCG team, and there's a bunch of different content creators that like to post different videos on here, and we're kind of reviving it. I feel like I usually just kind of run the podcast, so it's nice to get up a masterclass for that channel as well. And if you're tuning in on my own channel, well, thanks for tuning in. Go make sure you check out the Draw Pass TCG team. The logo is in the corner, and the link to that channel will be in the description below. Regardless of whichever channel you're watching on, I'll post both links. And yeah, so if you're wondering why I'm playing Crustle or why you should take my advice, I mean, you don't have to. I'm just trying to compile all the information I got on it, but I have had a lot of success with this deck recently, which has felt pretty good. I made day 2 at the Milwaukee Regional. I have gotten first at, I think, 3 challenges. I've gotten third at 2 cups and fourth at another. Like, I'm so close to taking down a cup. I honestly think I could have taken down one. I just threw at the end, so that wasn't a fault of the deck. It was kind of more of a fault of my own. So, I've definitely been performing well. I've been playing well online. I've gotten a lot of data playing Crustle overall, so I just wanted to share that with you, as well as some different Crustle archetypes and all of the Crustle tech cards that I could really think of. So without yapping anymore, I mean, I think it's time we jump right in. So, when we're looking at Crustle, the first thing I wanted to go over is, like, why are we using Crustle as the core? Why is this a deck? Why is this a card? Because it is very underwhelming looking compared to other, like, big EXs, like Charizard and Dragapult and Gardevoir and stuff like that. Why are we building a deck around Crustle as a whole? One, its typing is honestly pretty solid. Being a grass type is really sweet because there's not many fire types in the format that are being played frequently, and the ones that are, with the exception of one popular one and a couple very niche ones, there's not really many Pokemon that are going to swing for Oko from weakness, which is huge because many decks are going to have to use non-ideal or non-optimal attackers to actually damage the Crustle, and that's going to bring me to the ability, the why we're playing this as our core. It's the ability. The ability has an insane defensive capability. Mysterious Rock In, preventing all damage by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX, is so busted, it's not even funny. I actually think that's such a strong ability. Now, it does not stop effects of attacks. For example, if, Dragapult attacks an active Pokemon, the 6 damage counters from the Phantom Dive, since it's a damage counter, it does actually work through the Crustle, but we do have ways to work around that, which I'll get into when I get into the lists and tech cards and stuff like that. But yeah, overall, this ability is just ridiculous. Superb Scissors, while lacking in the overall damage output and kind of capping yourself at 120, you can combo with a few other solid attackers, and we'll get into that in a bit when we talk about the different archetypes. You could boost this damage a little bit with things like Monkey Dory. I would stray from tool modifiers such as Defiance Band, Vitality Belt, and stuff like that, just because of the tools that I think are much, much more effective on Crustle, but again, we'll get into that in the list. There is a Stadium that could get up to 130, which is relevant in a couple matchups too, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, its attack is honestly the most underwhelming part of the card, but you have to take into account you're not going to take damage from many EX Pokemon, and the ones that have Shred, you can 2-shot, such as like Mew EX and Cornerstone. You can even 1-shot unless there's like HP modifiers or something, in which case you're still 2-shotting it. So you don't have to worry about many EX Pokemon attacking through you because many of them are copying your attack, such as Mew or Cornerstone, which has a lackluster damage attack as well. They're not KOing you either, or one-shotting you either. You can definitely win the KO war on these Shred Pokemon attackers, and your own Superb Scissors has Shred as well. So if you're up against an opposing Cornerstone, because I feel like I get a lot of comments on that on my Crustle videos and stuff, if you're up against a wall-type Pokemon such as a Cornerstone or something like that, Superb Scissors is not affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, which is why Mew can copy it and shred through the Crustle, and it's why you can attack Cornerstone for Oko, because they are weak to Grass, and while we're not affected by any effects, weakness and resistance is not an effect. That's a game mechanic, so those still apply. Now, anyways, moving on a little bit, I want to start to get into the deck lists. The first one I kind of wanted to open up with is not my own. It's actually the fourth place finish from the Champions League that happened recently by Kisaki. It's just a pure Crustle list, and that's why I wanted to open with it. It's got all of the spice we wanted to see in just pure and utter Crustle. And the reason, before I get into why this deck is phenomenal, I think the reason why this archetype isn't my personal favorite is because of its awful auto loss matchup to Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir EX can work around Crustle very, very easily because they've got attackers like Drifloon sometimes, like 99% of the time they've got Screamtails in their deck. They still have Mew EX to copy and shred, and then you're not going to be OHKOing their big attackers such as Gardevoir and Mega Diancie, so if they take hits with those, they can, pivot them out of the active and then spam Monkey Dories and get that damage, boosted on whatever attacker they're using for OHKO. And I think this list capitalizes on literally every other matchup but Gardevoir. And I don't remember Kisaki's run perfectly, but I'm pretty sure, he dodged a lot of Gardevoir, which is always really solid. But yeah, I mean, you're playing a 3-3 Crustle line. You got the 3 Monkey Dory, which doubles down as, extra healing, but also, the damage modifier because you're able to move the damage from your own Crustle to your opponent's active. You're playing 4 Grass and 4 Dark to make sure that the 2 copies of Crispin in your deck are always hitting. There's just a bunch of energy acceleration there. And then we also have 1 energy switch, which is going to be huge when trying to chain Monkey Dories. That way we can kind of focus on making sure our Crustles are established first, and we have minimal energy for the early game while we're still setting up our board to swing those energies from one Monkey Dory to another and make sure we're healing fully. Now, this deck chose to use the A-Spec Secret Box, which, again, isn't my favorite, but I definitely see the value in, and I think the reason that you can go lower on counts of Crispin and Iono and even Lanazade and stuff like that is because you can dig them out as early as you need with Secret Box. The supporter you're prioritizing is Arven for consistency and Boss's Orders to make sure you're taking KOs on problematic Pokemon, and Secret Box allows you to pull the supporter you need for the following turn whenever you want. So if you get it in the early game, you can use the Arven, and the supporter you'll probably take is Crispin. That way you're attacking immediately after Ascension on Dwebble. And if you're unfamiliar with the Dwebble, the 1 attack cost on it is called Ascension. You just attach an energy, search your deck for a Pokemon that evolves, i.e. Crustle, and then you're able to just get rolling the next turn, and you already got your beefy wall Pokemon established without having to worry about getting donked, as long as you can get that evolving attack off. So you definitely want to go second with this deck. I think one of the other amazing things about this deck is these row 6 machinations. I actually did not include that in my supporter tech card slide, which, I'll explain why in a minute. I kind of wanted to focus on 3 things, but I think in any Crustle list you're playing, you're kind of forcing a slower game, and I feel like especially if you're playing just straight Crustle, 06 Machinations is a phenomenal card to tech in, especially with cards like Alakazam gaining popularity, because now we've got a lot of heavy draw engine decks such as Golden Go, Kangaskhan, Bouffaline, and Alakazam. So, you can get a lot of value off the Zerosix, not counting the light disruption counts. We're only playing 2 Ionos. So there are going to be times where you're playing up against Dragapult and they go Lilies for 8 and then triple Recon Directive. Now they got 14 cards in hand and you're like, all right, yeah, we're going to Zerosix here on that next turn. So there's definitely a high value on that supporter. I think it's a solid one to use. I think the other big calling card that makes Crustle actually so insane right now is this Jumbo Ice Cream. You heal 80 damage from your active Pokemon that has 3 or more energy attached, and remember, Crustle needs 3 to attack. So by the time you got your Crustle up and rolling and your opponent's done a little bit of damage to you, you can take that Jumbo Ice Cream and heal 80, which basically resets many popular attackers into Crustle, such as Solrock and Fan Rotom. So the Jumbo Ice Cream is definitely what makes this deck lethal. And I think including 2 copies of Jumbo Ice Cream is a really, really solid minimum for the deck. I can definitely see an argument for 3, but of course you're going to always have 2 copies of Luxurious Cape anytime you have more than a 2/2 line of a Crustle. Luxurious Cape adds 100 HP to the non-Rulebox Pokemon it's attached to. However, your opponent does take 1 extra prize card when they KO it with damage from an attack. So Alakazam's damage counters will not get them the extra prize card. However, it still has 100 extra HP. But if something like Mew EX with Shred does take out the Crustle, then of course they will take 2 prize cards. So between the extra 100 HP from Luxurious Cape, putting Crustle at now 250 HP, and Jumbo Ice Cream, plus the Monkey Dories, I mean, you can see how there's a ton of healing in this list to get the ball rolling. I think the other really interesting card that I will talk about a little more in depth in a bit is the Practice Studio, allowing all Stage 1 Pokemon to do 10 more damage, and having Crustle get up to 130 damage is very nice when you're going into things like Raging Bull, because the Baby Bull has 130 HP, and there are a few other niche situations where I think that 10 extra HP is really, really nice. But I don't know if that's super relevant. I mean, it's been a bit since this Champions League took place, and I think as I'm prepping for Toronto and stuff like that, this is a card on my radar that I could play, but not one I'm absolutely dying to play. I think the other interesting thing that we've included in this Crustle list is Counter Catcher. So now you can get a Gusting card from Arvin or just Boss's Orders. So these Pokegears are now increasing their value in the late game because we've got more Gust to take down our opponent's Pokemon. And just in case you're wondering too, I'm going to have a whole section on like matchup spreads and how we deal with certain decks. So if you're wondering, oh, like what are my targets in like this matchup? Why do I need this much Gust? I'm going to get into it. I just kind of wanted to cover some lists first. Going on to the next slide is actually going to be the Kangaskhan Crustle combo. Now, I think this combo has gotten a bit of popularity lately and is pretty strong. And this is a list that at a glance I really, really liked, so I wanted to include it in the slide. It was piloted by William S. at the Aeromax Regional on Limitless. He got second place. He went 11-2-2, definitely speaking to how good a player he is and how strong Crustle can be in Kangaskhan. So Kangaskhan, if you don't know, you are an insanely tanky attacker, and I think the biggest reason for pairing Crustle with Kangaskhan is because Crustle's biggest weakness will always be Gardevoir while it's in the format, and Kangaskhan offers you an alternate playstyle that is very strong into Gardevoir. Not only that, but Kangaskhan is also a solid backup attacker, and this is probably the only Crustle variant to actually have a draw engine from the Run Errand. So it's not even a bad Pokemon to have in general because you can set it up very easily. It's still 3 energy, you're still getting value off your Jumbo Ice Creams regardless if you're playing Crustle or Mega Kangaskhan. You're still playing that defensive deck style, so you don't have to worry about like one is an aggro line, one is a defensive line. I think the Kangaskhan still gives you that Crustle versatility, that defensive wall into many matchups. It's not the worst lead because many other popular matchups struggle into Kangaskhan, such as I think Charizard I felt pretty confident with the Mount Kangaskhan testing, as well as especially Dragapult. So playing the Kangaskhan and Crustle offer many different options to many different popular decks. The Monkey Dories are still included in this variant, which is huge because they are going to help both Crustle and Kangaskhan not only heal but take those one-shot KOs. I think one of the biggest differences in this deck between like the pure Crustle decks and the next variant, which I'll talk about in a second, is the amount of investment you have into the Kangaskhan. Because we're playing Kangaskhan similar to its own like pure build, you're playing Precious Trolley to dig up off the Arvin, and then with the Precious Trolley you can establish whatever board you need depending on what deck your opponent is playing. Not only that, but you're playing 2 copies of Bravery Charm and 2 copies of Lively Stadium, which yes, boof your single prize Bouffalants and Monkey Dories, but more importantly get your Kangaskhan up there to take as much damage as possible without getting KO'd, and that's why your Guardy matchup is so positive. Now, I think the thing that kind of draws me away from this variant compared to other Crustle variants is how much you can invest into the Crustle, and I think that's kind of what I wanted to explain on like why are you putting this in Kangaskhan. Are you a Kangaskhan player looking to fix other matchups that are a little difficult, such as Golden Go? If so, I think this is a great option and definitely a great way for Kangaskhan to go. Or are you a pure Crustle player looking to get a better matchup into Guardy and stuff like that? I think if you're a pure Crustle player, this deck definitely strays a bit more from the pure Crustle archetype, and reason being is that one Luxurious Cape. If 90% of the time when you're playing against Dragapult and stuff like that, you want to use the Crustle, that's the playstyle you like, I feel like this archetype might not be the one for you because there's a lot less investment that you honestly really need into decks like Dragapult. The 2 Mist Energy and the 1 Luxurious Cape are the ones that scream at me. For example, I know my face is actually covering the Luxurious Cape here, but this list is only playing 1 copy of it. You either need to boost the amount of capes you're playing, maybe get an extra Mist Energy in there to help you into things like Dragapult and some other matchups, or you might just have to look at different archetypes of Crustle, and I've got one in the next slide that I think will help a ton. But yeah, I think it's like, why are we playing this deck? What are we trying to do? What matchup are we trying to fix? Because, we're taking 2 good archetypes on their own, we're mashing them together. So you have to think of which are you naturally going to want to play more, which do you have a bit more faith in. when you're determining if you want to play Crustle, because with all defensive and wall type decks, you have to know your own deck very well, but not only that, you have to know your opponent's deck arguably better than they do, so you know what potential tech cards they could be playing, which you have to prep for in advance. There's going to be a lot more pressure on the deck building and innate piloting skill and plan on those matchups than there is in, you know, like your reactivity or your in-game decisions. You kind of have to have that game outline the second you understand what deck your archetype your opponent is playing. So, you know, I think making that decision on if you want to play Kangaskhan with Crustle, or I should say if you want to play Crustle with Kangaskhan, is a very important decision to make early on. Now, this is my own list, and this is the list that I've been playing a ton recently. It's the list I've taken down a couple of challenges with. I think 3 so far. I've gotten top 4s at multiple cups at this point. I've been doing really well online. I think this list is feeling very, very solid, and it is Crustle Iron Thorns, an archetype that existed a while ago and have kind of revamped and tried to change a ton. One of the things I wanted to jump to immediately is the Iron Thorns inclusion in it, and specifically this Ditto. So obviously Iron Thorns shuts down all rulebox abilities while it's in the active, so there's a pressing need to always lead, blind lead Iron Thorns, because if you're up against Gardevoir, you want to make sure that there's no Dwebbles in play. Of course, if you happen to get a Dwebble in play and that's the Pokemon you lead, there's nothing you can do about it, and while that sucks, you know, you could figure it out. And in big settings like a regional, it's usually a best of 3, or from my experience, you know, I'll hit a Gardevoir in Top Cut and stuff like that, and hey, I mean, you know, if I lead Dwebble, it's cool. And I've hit Gardevoirs outside of Top Cut, you know, in the Swiss rounds, and I've gotten, I'd say, lucky a couple times. But I'll explain why the math is putting the luck in my favor, and I've led Iron Thorns or Ditto, so I'm able to react accordingly and kind of set up my game. So when you're playing, you know, as I talk about the matchups, I'll probably talk about it from my experience testing with this specific deck, so I won't get into why each tech card is specifically here for different matchups. I kind of want to focus on you know, just this archetype as a whole and the differences. Ooh, whoopsies. Oh wait, I went backwards. There we go. So yeah, you know, the Iron Thorns helps a ton. By playing the Ditto, we effectively have 5 Iron Thorns or 4 Dwebble, depending on the matchup lead we need. And what I mean by that is, again, you always want to go second. And this, you know, breakdown right now, I'm going to talk about ideal-ish scenarios. You win the coin flip, you go second, or your opponent chooses first. Your opponent's then going to take a turn, kind of show you what they're playing. If you see a Ralts, come down especially, you always want to switch Ditto to Iron Thorns, and if you have no idea what your opponent is playing, again, you always want to switch Ditto to Iron Thorns just in case they do get the Ralts down, you know, or if they just have a Pheasantipity EX, that could be Gardevoir. If they just have a Mew EX, that could be Gardevoir. So Iron Thorns is always your best lead there, and because Ditto on your first turn can just discard and become any Pokemon, it creates a scenario where now you have 5 cards that you can open in your deck, and they could turn into or just be Iron Thorns. Or if your opponent goes first and they get a Charcadet down and you see, okay, my opponent's playing Ceruledge, that's obviously a Crustle matchup. Boom, now your Ditto becomes a Dwebble. So you're able to discard it, get the Ascension off even easier. And the reason it's not bad to blind lead Iron Thorns into literally every matchup is, from my extensive testing with this deck, you're rarely going to set up 2 Crustles. You are going to have enough healing to power through the entire game with 2 Crustles and 2 Prep Crustles with the 2 Luxurious Capes that you can't see the number, but are in my deck, is only 4 prize cards. So you have 2 copies of Future Booster Energy Capsule, which again is covered by my face, I apologize. You got 2 copies of Future Booster Energy Capsule and a ton of Arven to make sure that it is very, very easy to pivot out of Iron Thorns. And when you pivot out of Iron Thorns with the free retreat from the Energy Capsule, you can go straight into Dwebble, manual attach the energy, attach a Luxurious Cape if you got it, boom, Ascension, you're already into Crustle. This Iron Thorns is sitting on your bench, and anytime you're worried about, oh, but what if my opponent boss KOs Iron Thorns, it's okay. You are only going to play this match with 2 Crustles. We don't have Monkey Dories or anything else, so, you know, you don't really matter. You just want to prioritize getting 2 Crustles set up as fast as possible in 99% of matchups. The other huge difference, I mean, there's definitely some crazy cards like Bianca's Devotion, Defiance Fest, Pokemon League Headquarters and stuff, which I will get into their specific matchups and, you know, reasons why they're there under the tech cards and matchup slide. But the other big difference in my deck is the Pokevital A. Since we're not playing Monkey Dory, which I know helps in the damage output a ton, I think more importantly is a big hit to the healing potential in this deck. So by playing Pokevital A, I have won more games than I can count by playing this A spec, and I think like 95% of the time I'm usually not sitting there like, damn, I wish Secret Box was in my deck, because that's the other like kind of pure Crustle A spec. Usually you only play the Trolley and things like a Kangaskhan or Mega Absol hybrid. So yeah, generally I feel like Pokevital A is winning me so many games. This is not an A spec I'm even debating about taking out. I think this is a super high value A spec. And then I'm also playing a 4 Mist Energy, 4 Grass Energy, 4 Electric Energy on top of 4 Crispin. So the 4 Mist just increases my draw potential of pulling this card so much, and that is a huge help. But the 4 Grass, 4 Electric is because if I'm against Guardia, I want to make sure I got enough Electric to pivot between 2 to 3 Iron Thorns to close out the match. And if I'm playing, the other 85% of decks, I want to make sure I got enough Grass Energy to not only set up 2 Crustles, but also enough other types of energy in my deck that my Crispins are always drawing to and always accelerating as many energy as possible. So now jumping into the tech cards, and I'm looking, it's already been 20 minutes. This is going to be a bit of a longer masterclass. Now that I look at this, I still have a few slides to go over. But anyways, the tech cards, these are, I think, the most like switchable cards, in the deck. I'll go over, some energy, then I'll go over some tools, then I'll go over some stadiums, some porters, and the A specs. A little bit of stuff to go over here before the matchups. I think Mist Energy is definitely the best energy in Crustle. I mean, you saw my own list. I'm playing for Mist Energy. I think the Mist Energy is absolutely busted. It helps into things like Alakazam. It helps into things like the damage counters from Phantom Dive. And since Alakazam is getting very popular and they play 2 Enhanced Hammers, playing 4 Mist Energy just means it's a race to get 3 Mist Energy down before you lose, because there's no Pokemon in play, because it's a very fast deck. And maximizing the odds of drawing those is huge. Now, Jet Energy is a card that has been in Crustle since like the dawn of Crustle, and that's because it's a very hard Pokemon to pivot. Crustle's got a huge retreat cost, so having that Jet Energy adds another level of flexibility on if your opponent gusts a Crustle on your bench that's not set up. Now you have Jet Energy to bring it into the active. Well, I think this is a fine energy to play. I think just maximizing the speed in which you could set up 2 Crustle is just more efficient and adds to another level of consistency for the deck. And cutting the Jet Energy for a 4th Mist Energy is very, very important. It's not as popular as of late, but Therapeutic Energy is an energy you infrequently see in Crustle, and I think is very, very important to know it's there and just kind of have as a backup option in your mind in case you want to play it. It only provides a colorless energy like the other 2, but it will remove and prevent status conditions such as a sleep, confusion, or paralyzation from affecting your Crustle. And the reason why that is so important is the amount of decks that play Monkey Dory and can use Monkey Dory to attack. The confusion can lose you many games, and by preventing the confusion from the Therapeutic Energy, whether you attach it to a Pokemon that's already confused or you attach it to a Pokemon you're worried about getting hit with a Mind Bend attack, it doesn't matter. Therapeutic Energy can definitely save the day. Again, this is part of the reason why I'm playing for Mist Energy. Because I'm playing for Mist Energy, my chance of drawing into it is just so much higher. Off Lilies, off Ionos, off my opponent's Ionos, and stuff like that. And I draw into Mist Energy very easily, so the matchups that play Monkey Dory, I can prevent confusion by getting Mist Energy down early, because it doesn't remove any existing effects such as confusion. However, it does prevent them, and status conditions are an effect of an attack. So if I could get the Mist Energy down early, I don't have to worry about using Therapeutic Energy. And since there's other matchups that can only use Mist Energy, such as Dragapult and Alakazam, I think there's a higher value in playing 4 copies of Mist. But I think a 3 copy of Mist, 1 copy of Therapeutic, or 3 Mist, 1 Jet Energy are all very valid options. I just definitely think you need the 3 Mist Energies while playing through the meta at the moment. Getting into some of the tool cards, I think these tool cards are all phenomenal. I think Defiance Vest and Rigid Band play very, very similar roles when attached to Crustle. You're not worried about taking damage because maybe it's a deck like, what is it called? Tord Box, the Absol box where, their best attacker is the single prize Yveltal, and that's the one they're using 90% of the time. Yes, you got to worry about Monkey Dories, but the Yveltal getting up to 110 is vaguely problematic, so you want to attach the Rigid Band to take 30 less damage, or you want to bank on losing and attach the Defiance Vest and take 40 less damage. I think all of those are valid options while keeping Crustle at the single prize Pokemon, and you're not giving it the extra 100 HP and the extra prize card worth of value. So I think as a one of for different decks, this is huge. I think against things like Golden Go, this could be very nice too, because you now create a world where Soul Rock is only doing, assuming you're using the Rigid Band, 40 damage, and if you're using the Defiance Vest, 30 damage. So, you've created a great world where you're taking a lot less damage from attacks, and I think if like Golden Go, Terra Box, and probably Terrazard get more popular, I think like Rigid Band could be a huge inclusion, because many of those decks are not swinging for much damage at all frequently. So reducing the damage you take is nice and takes some of the pressure off your Jumbo Ice Creams. I think Turbo Energize is a great tool tech card, but it's more for the consistency in the early game, especially if you're playing something like Iron Thorns. Maybe you don't get the Future Booster Energy Capsule, but there's a world where you actually get double Dwebble, you get the Buddy Buddy Poffin, and you want to maybe get a Turbo Energize and kind of set up 2 Crustles with an energy that you can retreat into the following turn because you're not worried about a KO at all, or you could just get 2 energy on a benched Crustle on an in-between turn on a Pokemon you don't have Cape on. So now you're setting up 2 Crustles very faster in the mid game. You're getting energy down much faster in the early game. I think especially in the Iron Thorns variant, if you're into Gardevoir, this is a very nice tool to play. I just found it isn't the most essential, and I found more value into some other cards, but I think Turbo Energize is definitely a great tool to consider. You just have to worry about the synergy between Turbo Energize and Ascension, because they do kind of work against each other. Ideally, those are both attacks you want to go second and use on your first turn. You want to evolve into Crustle immediately, and you also want to Turbo Energize to get energy in play immediately. So it's a little tricky to figure out like the fine line on when do I Energize, when do I Ascension. That's why I don't have it in my list currently. I don't think it's necessary because I almost always want to go turn 2 Ascension, but it's definitely a solid card to play. Now, talking about some stadiums, I think these stadiums all have crazy value, to be honest, and I think any combo of stadium you put with Town Store, because Town Store is essential and an uncuttable card, I think is totally fine. I think Artisan could probably be in that combo with Town Store. You're either playing Town Store to get the Luxurious Cape, or you're playing Artisan to get the basic Pokemon. You're playing a consistency stadium. That's a non-negotiable, I think, in Crustle. It's really just how do you want to deal with some optional like tech stadium bump type effects. I think Team Rocket's Watchtower is busted right now with the amount of Charizard, Pidgeot, and especially Terrazard, and now Kangaskhan is in play. I think Watchtower holds some crazy value. And I think it's definitely a stadium worth playing. In fact, I'm playing one of in my own list. I think Practice Studio to get up to 130 damage, take out some 130 HP Pokemon is very, very valuable. I've talked about that a little bit. I think Community Center is one of the most slept on stadiums for Crustle. Reason being, I'm just going to talk about Dragapult Dusknoir as my example. So for that deck to work, they could Curse Blast your active Crustle, right, and do 130 damage. And we know they're playing Jamming Tower. They're playing 2 copies of Jamming Tower. So what that means is if they Itchy Pollen you on their first turn, because that's what Dragapult does, they're going to put 10 damage on your Crustle. They're then going to Rare Candy into Dusknoir, Curse Blast, put 130 more damage on it, putting you at 140 HP. 140 damage taken, you have 10 HP left. They can play Jamming Tower to remove the effect of your Luxurious Cape. And then if they swing for 10 damage, they actually do KO, because remember that Badoo is still in the active. You might have just used Ascension and not gotten that set up yet. Like to KO the Badoo, or they could just, have a Jercloak set up, or another Badoo, because all Dragapult lists are playing 2 Badoo now. So, that 10 damage is actually wildly relevant. So in the mid to late game, or even the early game if you lead it, getting the Community Center and healing your Crustle by even just 10 HP if you played a supporter. And if we're going to go back a couple slides, look at the amount of supporters in my list, chances are you played one. Healing just 10 HP off Crustle actually could set Dragapult back 1 to 2 turns, which is so important and could be the difference between you killing that Badoo and not losing that turn, and then being able to play Jumbo Ice Cream or Pokevital at the following turn. So that is a very, very solid, I think, option as a stadium that's very underrated. I think another situation it comes up is actually in the Terra Box matchup, because they can attach a Vitality Band to Mew, and if they swing 120 damage, copying your, Superb Scissors, then you will have 130 HP left. I think 50% of Terra Box players are either playing Tool Scrapper or Vitality Band. I feel like more often than not at in-person tournaments, I've seen more Vitality Band play for the Wellspring Ogre Pond, but it works in this situation because they can attach it to Mew the following turn because you're not one-shotting it, and they're going to swing for 130 damage, doing 250 damage between 2 turns. So Playing the Community Center can heal that 10 damage and force a situation where a card like Bianca's Devotion, which I'll get into on the next slide, could be legal. Pokemon League Headquarters is another phenomenal stadium that I think works very defensively because it forces Pokemon like Mew EX, Badoo, and even Chi-Yu to need an extra energy, and oftentimes that is like make or break and could help you win the game. So I think that is yet another phenomenal defensive stadium. Talking about tech cards, these I think are all phenomenal. I've talked about one situation where you can force Bianca's Devotion at more than one point in the game, making you have 30 or less HP remaining, creating a situation where now you are getting full value off this full heal, and that is just the most heartbreaking thing to see in a tournament. I played this card off a Fever Dream thinking it wasn't great, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't great and it wasn't the best thing in the world just so I could get it out of my mind. I started playing it and I fell in love with it immediately. There are multiple scenarios, which I'll talk about on the matchup slide, where you could use this card at multiple points in the game and it works phenomenally. So I think playing a one of any of these three cards for extra healing is super worth it. Fennel will be, I think, the best one if we see a world where Grimmsnarl becomes like top 3 most popular decks. You heal 40 damage from each of your Pokemon, and since Crustle decks have many abilities in play, using the Fennel is widely like situational, but also like super helpful in the matchups where it helps. You know, if we see more Frost Ice Munkidori or Grimmsnarl play come up, I think Fennel is kind of going to be the healing supporter of choice, or the one of Pokemon Center Lady. You heal less damage than Jumbo Ice Cream, but more importantly, you recover from all special conditions. So if we see a lot more Munkidori Mind Bend plays going around, we see more decks including Munkidori, or you just want to really make sure you never get confused at any point and you could always play through, a one of Pokemon Center Lady for 60 healing is huge because that's 2 Munkidoris worth of Adrena Brains on top of healing from confusion, or just a straight up Mind Bend never happened. You heal 60 damage from it, plus you healed the confusion. So I think Pokemon Center Lady is definitely another solid supporter option. Now, when we're talking about tech cards, I think it really depends on what archetype you're playing is the best for which is the best one. I think if you're playing something like the Mega Absolbox or Mega Kangaskhan variant, Trolley is the non-negotiable way to go. I think if you're playing any other variant, it becomes a world. If you're talking about Pokevital A or Secret Box is for more early game consistency. Pokevital A is for the more healing potential, forcing your opponent to work that much harder, arguably 2 Jumbo Ice Creams worth of harder to kill one Crustle. I'm a Pokevital A stan. I think this is the best A spec for Crustle. I think it's frankly made for Crustle, but I definitely see the value in Secret Box, and I understand why more people put Secret Box in, because this is a deck where you want to make sure your consistency in the early game is just through the roof. You want to make sure you're set up with your wall as quickly as possible and you're established and ready to attack as soon as possible, and Secret Box is definitely going to guarantee you that route to victory a little bit more. And that's why I play a ton of supporters like for Arven, for Crispin, and for Pokegear in my list. It's to make sure I've got the consistency that's there while leaning into the healing a little bit more and allowing me to play just 2 Jumbo Ice Creams and not 3. It's also more healing that I can output in a game to make my opponent work through just 1 Crustle. So, I really like the Pokevital A a lot. So now we're going to talk about the matchup spreads a bit. And I mean, maybe I don't necessarily think I'm biased, but I think this might be like the most widely data backed masterclass I've ever done. And the reason being, so I make spreadsheets for my team on Google Pages. Every tournament my team is going to a regional, and it doesn't matter who's going. I'll just make the spreadsheet, and I'll make sure that it auto updates with like matchup spreads and any information they want to collect, such as like how much they mulligan, how many times they open with the supporter. This is using the data from Limitless, Trainer Hell, and also my own personal data that I've been tracking across like a couple hundred games probably at this point on like these matchup spreads. Because of that, I'm going to be talking about this from the perspective of my Crustle Iron Thorns variant. I think these matchup spreads do change a little bit, based on what variant you're playing. Some of them I did try to like kind of measure out and assume, maybe we're playing a different variant, and kind of tweaked a little bit there. For example, I think, I'll just jump in like with Gardevoir EX. I think this is a borderline auto loss for any pure Crustle variant. However, if you're playing Crustle Kangaskhan or Crustle Iron Thorns, like my own personal win rate into Gardevoir, I think is at 63 or 64% right now. I've done very well into it playing Iron Thorns. So I would have it in the good matchup category, but I think like, because it still kind of is determined by what Pokemon you lead, while I have increased those odds of being Iron Thorns, it still could be a 50-50, especially if I lead Crustle. Now it's pretty bad. If I lead Iron Thorns, now it's pretty good. So, definitely situational. I think the Kangaskhan variant offers a little more flexibility. So overall, I think, with the most Crustle players comboing it with someone, I actually think Gardevoir is not as bad a matchup as people think. Real quick, I'm going to kind of go through the auto wins, and then I'm going to take us through the good matchups, the 50-50s, except for Gardevoir, because I just kind of explained that a little bit, but I'll go a little more in depth when we get to it again. And then the auto loss. Actually, you know what? I'll just start the auto losses right now. It's Lopunny Dusknoir. There's too many Dusknoirs, and that's too many Mega EX Pokemon with Shred. This is like the most problematic Shred EX Pokemon in the game because it 3-shot. We 3-shot it. It 2-shots us. The other Shred Pokemon, such as Cornerstone or Mew EX that are out right now, we 2-1-shot, depending on if they have any healing modifier or HP modifiers in play for the Cornerstone. So yeah, this is definitely a hard matchup to work through. Not the world's most fun pairing. Luckily for us Crystal players, it's not very popular, so we don't have to worry about it too much. So going into the auto wins, the Flareon Noctowl builds at the moment are not all even playing Mew EX. Their main attacker is legitimately going to be Fan Rotom, which this deck walks through, and there's not really more you need to explain into that. I think this is another argument on why we should be playing for Mist Energy, because I think their only other win con besides Fan Rotom killing like a lone Crustle is actually using Sylveon and going for a board wipe, removing all Pokemon from your bench before you could properly establish, and then dealing with maybe an active Dwebble that you weren't able to Ascension or something like that. So playing Mist Energy prevents that Pokemon from getting shuffled into your deck from Sylveon, and I think is another reason to play 4 of them, because if you hit this niche matchup that, is popular in some local scenes and also from some very high-level players that love like the evolutions, you could pretty much guarantee an auto win with a Mist Energy or 2. I think Cerulege has always been a phenomenal matchup for Crustle. I mean, they legitimately only have Solrock, and you swing for weakness on Solrock in case the 110 HP they had wasn't, comfortable enough. Like, you'll walk through this matchup, 2 Jumbo Ice Creams and a singular Crustle, doesn't matter what variant you're playing, you could definitely body Cerulege, and I think this is the biggest reason for combining it with Kangaskhan, is this is a huge weakness on Kangaskhan's part that you provide a solid win con into, because this deck can definitely take Kangaskhan. Speaking of the devil, Kangaskhan Bouffalant, I mean, if they're playing the Crustle variant, I'm not going to lie, it could potentially be a little more difficult. They play Monkey Dories to heal their Crustles. We play things like Pokevital A. I have not dropped against this deck yet, knock on wood. I've just felt that it's very strong. Their other attacking option, if they're not playing the Crustle, is the single prize Bouffalant, which again, you just kind of assume they're going to get their HP modifiers down. They play a ton of them. So you might not one-shot the Bouffalant because you don't worry about the damage reduction. You have Shred. You'll go through the Curly Wall ability. You worry about the Lively Stadium. You worry about the Bravery Charm. They'll do a little bit of healing with their Monkey Dory as long as you got Luxurious Cape. And if you're like me playing Pokevital A, you really don't have to worry about that attack. You'll take them out in 1 to 2 shots. And at the moment, I'm playing 3 stadiums. Most Kangaskhan's are playing 2. So we'll win the Stadium War with Lively Stadium. I think this matchup definitely isn't bad at all. When we're talking about Zoroark, I mean, we're talking about a deck that revolves around a Grass Weak 2-prize Pokemon that cannot attack Crustle. There are 2 things you need to watch out for when playing this deck. One is going to be the Yveltal lock. They will try to Yveltal, take some damage with a Hero's Cape, and then move it over with Monkey Dory. Well, they set up for that 110 damage attack, which is a little problematic, and can be a bit difficult to work around if you don't, if you're hesitant, don't know what you're doing, which is fine. I mean, just don't be afraid to swing into that Yveltal. Yes, they'll move the damage with Monkey Dory. You gotta make sure you're attacking that thing early, before they're fully set up with like multiple Monkey Dories, and they got the Hero's Cape down. And even if they have all that stuff down, that's fine. Just make sure that when you're attacking, you're in a situation where you have your healing cards in your hand or access to them. You're in a situation where you have the Arven in hand, which could get you Pokevital A. You have a Jumbo Ice Cream in hand. You have a second Crustle set up on your bench, possibly. And you'll get through the Yveltal pretty fine. fine. The other thing to watch out for when you're up against Zoroark is the single prize Darmanitan. That Darmanitan is annoying. Its backdraft attack does 30 damage for each basic energy card in your discard pile. That's one of the reasons I actually initially included the Super Rod. It just removes, because there was like a resurgence of Zoroark, so just kind of removed some basic energy from my discard pile from a KO'd Crustle if that had happened, or maybe I led Iron Thorns and that got KO'd, had some energy attached to it. It removed those energies from the discard pile to make them swing even less. The other attack on Darmanitan is also insanely annoying. I don't remember I think it's like Flame Burst Body or something like that. It's 80 damage to your active, 80 to a benched Pokemon, or some 90 damage to active, 90 to a benched Pokemon. I think it's 90. Regardless, it's a fire type. It swings for weakness against Crustle. This is one of the few fire attacking Pokemons. However, it's not always included in Zoroark. But if it is, you got to be mindful because it's 180 damage coming into your Crustle. You are not one-shotting the Darmanitan in my variant of it. And, you got to make sure you could heal out of that. So with Pokevital A, Jumbo Ice Cream, that's definitely not a problem. You can definitely take that attack. But in general, got to watch out for it. Golden Go, and I made a difference between Golden Go Lopunny and literally every other Golden Go variant. This is no problem. I've had crazy success into this deck. I mean, the worst that they have in the non-Lopunny variants is a single prize Cramorant, which, we could take care of pretty consistently with things like Pokemon League Headquarters, with things like Pokevital A. We could kind of work through the Cramorant pretty effectively. Even Bianca's Devotion has come up huge because they'll get 240 damage done to a Crustle if they loop that attack twice without Vitality banned. So if you're able to kind of beat your way, through that a little bit and take that out 240 damage, you can use your 4 Pokegears to dig up Bianca's Devotion, full heal, take out the Cram for the final time that game, and then it's just Soul Rock. So I've had a great time in 2 non-Lopunny Golden Go variants. Terrazard, phenomenal variant to pair into. They do not play Chi-Yu. Why? Usually they don't. They are playing Terapagos as their cornerstone answer, and because they're not playing Chi-Yu, that just creates a world where you have to worry about non-optimal in terms of attacking Crustle Charmeleons, because they're usually playing the new ones that do 40 damage, so they're swinging for 80. You have to worry about the 80 damage, counting weakness, Charmeleon, the Fan Rotom, as well as Dusknoirs, all being the Pokemon of choice to get damage onto Crustles, and honestly, none of those do enough damage past the early game to really take you out. If you could get 2 Crustles down, you could definitely heal through it. You could sack a Crustle, put all your healing into the second one, or vice versa. You could put all your healing into the first one and let the second one just kind of close out the game. You can beat your way through that matchup pretty well as long as you get 2 Crustles in play. If they do play the Chi-Yu, it's definitely looking a bit scarier, and that's why the Charizard Pidgeot version is in the 50-50. In case that happens, that's why I'm playing things like Team Rocket's Watchtower. It makes it much harder to pull off the Chi-Yu combo. That's why I'm playing Pokemon League Headquarters. Now that's a third energy on Chi-Yu, so if they don't have a Jet Energy in their hand, it's going to be hard to use Charizard's ability to get the energy in play to attack with Chi-Yu while also retreat a Pokemon. I definitely have had a good bit of success in the Charizard, and I've had, honestly, borderline good matchup. I'm at the 54 to 56% win rate into Charizard Pidgeot, and I think that's the biggest difference between these two. Both are going to have Dusknoir. Both are switching to the Charmeleon that does less damage. I think if you're seeing the Charmeleon that does 90 damage but discards an energy, that one is much scarier because that one swings for 180 with weakness. That one is usually, if it's included anywhere, it's included in the Charizard Pidgeot variant and not the Charizard Knocked Owl variant, and that's another reason why this matchup is a little bit harder to take, because now you got to worry about Chi-Yu, now you got to worry about that Charmeleon, so it's definitely a little scary. But I think it's still a 50-50. You definitely got the healing to work your way through a Charmeleon. You can handle a Dusknoir even without the Psyduck. We've got enough healing to take that guy down. Also, Charizard is playing Klefki, so even if you play the Psyduck, there's no guarantee it's actually going to help you in those matchups, because almost every single Charizard player is playing Klefki for that reason. I think this is more than 50-50 matchup, but as you play and develop that matchup more, the stronger you become with it. I think the most important thing to note when you're talking about playing in a Charizard, you want to make sure that when you KO a Charmander, that's always going to be your target, or a Duskull. When you KO a Pokemon, you have to remember, is my opponent able to go Chi-Yu next turn? Do they just need a Charizard EX plus an Artisan or a Nest Ball to get the Chi-Yu down, then Charizard to get the energy to it? Am I going to lose my active Crustle? If the answer to that question is yet, you want to make sure that you're taking a KO on a Pokemon, either in the early game when it's very unrealistic they'll have all that combo, because all the pieces of that combo because it's the second or third turn, or you want to make sure you have Team Rocket's Watchtower or Pokemon League headquarters in play to offset the chances of them getting the Chi-Yu established. Those stadiums are going to help a ton in the Charizard matchup. So you got 2 stadiums to their 1 to 2 stadium outs, and remember you play 3, so you could still lead the early game town store, and then you could go in with either other stadium, making Chi-Yu much harder to pull off. Now, Charizard Dragapult is a lot more EX attackers with a lot less Dusknors. The only thing in this deck that is really a threat is going to be that Chi-Yu. So, as long as you prep for the Chi-Yu and you worry about working around it, you'll have no problem into Charizard Dragapult. Joltik box, very self-explanatory. Actually, this should be in the auto win matchup. I think I forgot to move that one. I don't even know why it's in the good matchup. I think I've lost 1 game in Joltik box. I just bricked pretty hard in my testing recently. It's a pretty much auto win. They can attack you with Galvantula, which does 180 damage. Past that, they got that Mew EX, they're cooked. And those 2 are not enough. They need more than that. And they have to use Joltik to set up the Galvantula, and if they use Joltik's attack, Joltik to set up the Mew, and if they use Joltik to set up the Mew, you're going to KO the Joltik, so that's 1 less Galvantula in play. Definitely a great matchup. I've talked about for Terra Box, how Bianca's Devotion is widely relevant. They're going to try to loop that Mew EX 2 to 3 times a game, and that's one of the reasons I've switched to playing Team Rocket's Watchtower. Playing that at any point really just halts this deck a ton and has created a world where without it, I had a good matchup into it. With it, I've had a better matchup into it. Just be mindful of the Vitality Band getting smacked down on the Mew at any point, because that is going to add up to 250 very, very quickly. Mew will use its attack to copy your Super Scissors. They will do 120 damage. And the next turn, when you only do 120 damage to them, they'll use Noctowl, get that Vitality Band, boom, attach, KO the Crustle, and that could be very hard in the early game to work around, so you want to just make sure that you're healing any chance you get if you take 120 damage from the Mew, or you're getting Team Rocket's Watchtower in play, or you're getting Pokemon League headquarters in play, because Mew is a basic Pokemon that will now need 4 energy to attack. Alakazam, I've talked about 4 Mist Energy mid. They're playing 2 copies of Enhanced Hammers. They're only doing damage via damage counters. If you could get 3 Mist Energy down, it doesn't even matter what Pokemon it's down on. Iron Thorns, Crustle, it's all the same. Crustle's probably a little better because it has more HP with the Luxurious Cape in the early game, so it could potentially force them to need an extra card. Regardless, it's not a bad matchup at all. I've had a pretty good time into it. Just make sure that you're rushing the Mist Energy practically more than anything else in your deck. Dragapult Dusknoir, I've talked about how Community Center can help that matchup if you want a little bit, but most importantly, I think the biggest thing to watch out for is just how many Dusknoirs are you allowing your opponent to get in play. Are you taking boss KOs on Dracloaks because that's their draw engine, or are you chasing down the Dusknoirs? I think the thing that's helped that matchup the most for me is, 1, playing 3 stadiums, so I can initiate the stadium race and win the war because they're not playing more than 2 Jamming Tower, I'm playing 3 stadiums. The other thing that's very helpful is making sure that literally every chance I can boss KO a Duskull, Dusclops, I am. And the second you see an energy manual attached to that Dusknoir, you know it's a threat that they're not going to use Curse Blast, but they're going to use its attack with, and its attack does 150 damage with Jamming Tower, means it's a KO, so that's why you want to make sure you got 2 Crustles in play and you are boss KOing a Dusknoir so they can never pull that off. And if they do, no problem, just try to make sure you attack it first. Try to make sure they have no more Jamming Towers left. There's things you can work around where that's really not a huge issue and you can still win the match. It's happened to me a couple times and I've lost because I wasn't able to respond, that I've won because I had an extra stadium, or I had an extra healing card, or I was able to boss KO it first, boss attack it first, so they did KO my first Crustle, my second one came in and kind of walked through. They're limited on recovery. They're playing like 2 to 3 Night Stretchers, maybe they're playing a Rod. They can't bring back the entire Dusknoir line that frequently. So taking a boss KO on Duskull, or especially Dusclops, can really, really swing the tide of that matchup a ton. Other than that, just make sure you get your Mist Energy into play, so if your opponent does go into Dragapult, they can't get the Phantom Dive damage counters down on your benched Crustle. That will fix the math for them on, Dracloaks plus 6 damage counters off Phantom Dive plus Dusclops is 110 damage. If they swing with Dracloak and have a Jamming Tower in play, that's now a KO, so if you're able to prevent those 6 damage counters, now a Dusclops plus Dracloak is not enough to KO even with Jamming Tower. So, just make sure you get those Mist Energy down there too. Grimmsnarl is a little difficult. I'm not gonna lie. Grimmsnarl is kind of hard because they overwhelm damage with the Frostlass, getting damage down on their own Monkey Dories, on their own Grimmsnarls and stuff like that. However, from my testing, Grimmsnarl has a very, very hard time recovering any Evo lines. So I've been doing a bit of testing on which is the optimal Pokemon to KO when playing against Grimmsnarl. Is it Grimmsnarl to take 2 prize cards? Is it Monkey Dory because that's what's moving the damage? Or is it Frostlass because that's what's setting up many of the passive damage counters in play on your Crustle as well as their own board state? From my experience, once you boss KO the Frostlass, that deck cannot recover them well. They're playing 1 to 2 copies of Night Stretcher, maybe a Rod or 2. They cannot loop Frostlass and set it up consistently. They need that turn to evolve, especially after their initial TM Evo. Because of that, Frostlass is the most optimal KO. If you do not attack the Grimmsnarl, they do not have damage to Monkey Dory to you. So, if you worry about KOing the Frostlass, there is no damage in play unless you put it there, and if you put it there, that means you're prepped for it. So I think when you actually target the Frostlass in this matchup, it's very, very helpful and a very strong out. Goldengo, Lopunny. Definitely the hardest Goldengo variant. I've actually, I think, 54% into it. I've gotten a lot better since I put in Bianca's Devotion, funny enough. This deck is usually playing Vitality Band. Vitality Band on Mega Lopunny or Solrock, the max damage they could do between 2 shots, assuming it's not a double Lopunny attack, is going to leave you with 30 or less HP remaining. Mega Lopunny will do 160, Solrock will do 70. If you look at the 2 of those, that's going to be, 200? I think it's 30, right? Because you got the 40. Yeah, 230. And if you attach a Vitality Band to either of those Pokemon on either attack, that puts you at 240, because it's obviously not going to get attached to both, which means that you can use Bianca's Devotion. And because of this, you have multiple chances to pull it off. You have multiple lines to make sure that you're winning this game. One of them is the early boss KO on Baniri. It's going to be a thing that you need to look for more than anything. You want to make sure that if they could play Baniri, you have a boss in hand so you could take it out before they evolve. The other thing is they need 2 energy on Mega Lopunny to attack. So even if they get the Mega Lopunny and they only have 1 energy attached to it, I don't care if they're staring down a Solrock. Boss up that Lopunny and make sure you attack it. Heal that damage from Solrock. You can deal with Solrock later. They have multiple copies of Turo. They usually have 1 to 2 copies of Turo in their deck. They are going to Turo their Mega Lopunny once, maybe twice, because it's not a hard Pokemon to set up again, and that's why we're playing Bianca's Devotion. It's to match them on that front. When we attack them twice, they'll probably go for a Turo play and then follow up with a Solrock attack. When they attack us twice, we want to make sure we Bianca's Devotion and kind of force them on that same line. And this is what I meant by you have multiple chances to pull up Bianca's Devotion. You're going to have a chance to do it on your first Crustle, and if you're playing a list like mine, I'm going to bank that you got a second one set up because I've had some great success getting 2 up practically every single game. So then you could use it on your second Crustle if your first did not. You whiffed it off the gear, you just didn't have a gear, you couldn't find it, whatever the situation is. You've got 2 Crustles to pull the same combo off and swing the tide of this matchup greatly. Now, it is still the hardest variant to work around because Mega Lopunny is that tanky. However, I think the more I've played it since Bianca's Devotion, I've seen my win rate going up a little bit more at a time. So I think with more testing into this, I think cards like Bianca's Devotion could help a ton. I think this is where maybe playing an extra Jumbo Ice Cream or something is very valuable too, and definitely something worth considering. I've talked about Charizard, Gardevoir Jellicent, or just regular Gardevoir. This is why I'm playing Defiance Fest, actually. So Defiance Fest plus Bianca's Devotion literally has changed this entire matchup for me. It was very hard initially for me to get through the Mega Diancie, even with Iron Thorns, because Mega Diancie is just 2 manual attachments, and then boom, they're swinging 240. Like, what do you do about that? Well, the answer is Defiance Fest. You hold it in your hand, you hold that Arven or the Defiance Fest itself in your hand until they've KO'd 1 Iron Thorns. And that's assuming you couldn't go just hyper aggro and like boss up the Mega Diancie while they're setting it up because you've got 2 Iron Thorns in place, so you don't care if your first one's KO'd. That happens sometimes. You don't even need Defiance Fest sometimes. You can just bully that Diancie into the discard pile, take 3 prize cards, and really fly through that matchup, which is great. But let's assume that they led Mega Diancie. It's the worst scenario. They attached the energy and they played the Vessel, so you know they have another energy in their hand. Dude, what do? Well, you just attach the Defiance Vest the following turn to the following Iron Thorns. Now it takes 200 damage, not 240. And because of that, you're left with 30 HP remaining, which means Bianca's Devotion. You just full healed the Iron Thorns. Now you get your extra attack off on the Mega Diancie. You full healed. You've reset their 2-shot damage clock. You've taken the KO. Now you're in a phenomenal scenario. Another option that I've played is actually Pokemon League Headquarters. You just have to remember that Pokemon League Headquarters will force your Iron Thorns to need an extra energy. More often than not, that's not a problem for me. I'm usually getting 4 energy on my Iron Thorns anyways, because I'm banking on the fact that Iron Thorns' attack moves an energy from the active Iron Thorns to a bunched one. So I'm putting the 4th there so that when it's moved, there's still 3 energy and I could attack the next turn. If you're playing Pokemon League Headquarters, you still need to get that 4th energy there, but there's future booster energy capsules so you can pivot between them if you need to. But also, remember, the Pokemon League Headquarters forces them to need a 3rd turn of manual attachments to their Mega Diancie and could potentially save you the game. So it's definitely a stadium worth considering as long as you keep it in mind on how that affects your own board state when playing against Gardevoir. I've had a good time into Gardevoir, man. I mean, playing effectively 5 Iron Thorns at the start and just always blind leading it has created a world where I feel much more confident with this variant of Crustle compared to any other Crustle variant I've played into Gardevoir. Tord Box, Mega Absol Box. That's a pretty difficult matchup to navigate. Losing the Monkey Dories, like not having them in Crustle Iron Thorns, is very, very difficult. It creates a world where they can... One, you need to get multiple missed energies down, and the reason is Terminal Claw. They can move 6 damage counters with Monkey Dory, and you don't have your own Monkey Dories to ping them back, which means that if there's 6 damage counters on you, they can go Terminal Claw and just insta-KO you unless you have missed energy. Many Absol deck players are playing an Enhanced Hammer. That's why I want to make sure you get 2 missed energy down, and the second you get 2 missed energy down, you've created a world where Terminal Claw is no longer a problem. So what's going to happen is similar to Zoroark Box, they're going to loop, but it's going to be more effective than Zoroark Box because they play Lively Stadiums and stuff like that too. They're going to be able to just loop the attack on Yveltal and take big KOs that way. It's going to be slow, it's going to be painful, they're going to use Clutch to their advantage, they're going to use the bottom attack, Oblivion Wing or whatever it is to their advantage. They're going to make sure that, you know, they're loading up the damage as nicely as possible on one Crustle while healing their Yveltal out of range for, you know, the big KO. Another reason why I found value in Pokemon League Headquarters. Making that Yveltal need 4 energy is crazy annoying. Not only that, Pokemon Vital A practically gives you a few extra turns while they get the energy needed on Yveltal because they do not play Crispins and stuff like that from my experience, or do not frequently play high counts of it, you know, if they play it at all. So yeah, I definitely think, you know, this matchup is winnable. I've had a good time into it. I've taught a couple people Crustle, and they've had some rough times into it. This is definitely the biggest learning curve. I think if you want help on this matchup specifically, you want to hit me up in the Discord server. I'm definitely down to go over this deck in more depth. We're just 55 minutes into this video. I'm going to be closing it out in the next 2 minutes, so, you know, I don't want to spend the next 40 minutes explaining how to beat this matchup. There is a way you can mathematically beat this matchup. It's hard, you just got to learn it, but once you learn it, you pretty much never forget it, and because you've learned that, it's much easier to analyze other decks and figure out how to beat them too. And that's something I made sure I learned very well following Milwaukee Regionals, because that's when this deck got super popular. Raging Bolt, biggest reason that you should play Practice Studio. They got the Baby Bolt, they got the Koraidon and stuff like that, I believe have 130 HP apiece, or Slitherwings, whatever it is. One of them has, a Baby Bolt definitely has 130, I'm pretty sure one of the other two have 130 as well. Swinging for 130 is the nicest thing in the world when you're up against Baby Bolts. Oftentimes right now they're not playing Jamming Tower, they're going Area 0 under depths, so you don't have to worry about the Jamming Tower as much as you used to, but always be prepped that they play it, because it's better to prep for the worst than prep they don't play it at all. It's much nicer to find out they don't play it and your luxurious capes are staying in play. This deck can and will overwhelm you sometimes, so just be careful. They've got a multitude of baby attackers they could use, which is very annoying for Crustle. They've got the Baby Bolt, they've got the Slitherwing, they've got the single prize Koraidon, they've got Fan Rotom, they've got a whole lot that they can attack and kind of load up damage very quickly before you've established 2 Crustles. Because of this, healing through on your first Crustle is very, very nice. If you manage to get 2 Crustles set up in play before your opponent has done any big damage or big attacks, maybe you want to save like that Pokevital for your second Crustle. You want to do as much work as you can with your first one, make them expend as many resources as possible, and then save that Pokevital or that Bianca's Devotion for that last Crustle. Bianca's Devotion, it's going to be a little harder to get the perfect math for Bianca's in this matchup, but it's definitely possible. Really depends on if they use the top attack on Baby Bolt or if they're just swinging with 130 damage from the bottom attack. You know, that'll be like the make or break on like, can you Bianca's this match? Regardless, the matchup still is not bad. They also play Mew EX, so they could set that up too as an attacker that you're not two-shotting. It's hard, man. I mean, there's a lot of Pokemon they can use to attack. That being said, you also are still such an annoying wall that this deck is just not prepped for perfectly that you can beat your way through this. And many people don't play every single prize variant of an attacker. Prep that they play all of them. Be happily surprised when they just play a Baby Bull or they just play a Slither Wings, or maybe they, don't have. It's really one of those. They definitely might not play Koraidon. I feel like that's the one most usually don't play. Prep to deal with all three. Be happily surprised when they do not. And yeah, that's Raging Bull. So now I kind of want to just go into the master ranking of this deck. The price of this deck, I mean, if you're going to buy this deck off TCG Player Dude, it's like $20. This deck is not expensive. Personally, I'm playing the Iron Thorns variant. I think if you're playing some of the other variants, it's a little more expensive. In general, though, Crustle is a very, very affordable deck that gives you a very good matchup spread. If we're talking about consistency, man, I mean, I love deck making. I personally believe in playing as many counts of one card as possible to make sure that you maximize the odds of pulling off whatever you're trying to pull off. And I think I've created I've fine-tuned an existing Crustle archetype to a very consistent point. I'm personally giving this deck an 8 out of 10 in consistency. You brick. It happens. Every deck bricks. There's nothing you can do about that. I brick a lot less than I had expected when I first played this deck, so I think it's definitely an 8 out of 10. The power level is definitely the lowest ranking of this deck. You're swinging for 120 to 160 damage if you have Future Booster Energy Capsule on Iron Thorns max. You are not one-shotting really anything except fan Rotoms and stuff like that. So the overall power level compared to other decks in the format is super low. You also got to keep in mind that 120 damage is more than enough to kill Dracloaks. It's more than enough to kill Solroks, Fan Rotoms. It's more than enough to deal with even Baby Bull. You can still two-shot Mew EX, which is like one of the biggest ops to this deck. You can still take down things very, very effectively, and there's nothing wrong with two-shotting Pokemon like Mew. If you're that upset about it, look at Dragapult. Dragapult is practically two-shotting everything. Kangaskhan is two-shotting so many things. Yes, they have ways to one-shot them with, the Dusknors and the Monkeydories and stuff like that, but just like that, we can heal damage, so it's like their attack never happened. If they attacked with Mew and we go Pokevital, hey, boom, it's like it never happened. Here we go. Now we got a full HP Crustle, and their Mew is at, enough HP left that we can just one-shot it from here on our second attack. So the power level is super low compared to other decks, but I think it's fine overall. The matchups, I'm legitimately giving an 8 out of 10. I mean, people think this is a very Crustle harsh meta. I agree. I just think you need to be a certain dedicated person to take Crustle to a different level of play and analyze the matchups a little bit more and create your own archetype that works for you. And if you need help with that matchup spread, you want a little more in-depth analysis, hit me up in the Discord server, hit me up in the comments down below on this Draw Pass channel or my own personal channel, and I'm more than willing to help you work it out there. I think the matchups are honestly very good for Crustle, though, depending on what archetype you play. The speed, I think, is just a 5 out of 10. It's not the world's fastest deck, man. You need to turn to Ascension. You got to get a Crispin. I'm playing 4 to try to maximize those chances. It's not a slow deck. That's why it's a 5. I'd say it's just about in the middle. You get the pace rolling enough. I think the thing that's the hardest is if you're looking at in-person timers and stuff like that, your opponent might play a little slower into Crustle because it's a pretty hard deck to navigate. And because of that, sometimes the speed is not really on your own fault, and it's not necessarily your opponent's either. They're just in tricky spots, so they take a little bit more time to think. So it's definitely a 5 out of 10. The versatility I actually think is a 7 out of 10. And the reason being is because there's a lot of partners right now you can pair with Crustle to give it a better matchup spread or help fix the matchups of another deck you really like. So I definitely think that Crustle is a 7 out of 10 on versatility. I think Crustle itself can deal with many, many decks on its own, giving it a little bit more versatility while keeping your own linearity, making it much easier to pilot in the moment. But I think the partners and the tech cards and stuff you play, I mean, the amount of tech cards in this deck you could play compared to other decks is like through the roof. There are so many more options for Crustle. And I think that kind of adds to the versatility. It's like, which matchup do we want to prioritize? We got the card to really help. Right now, for me, that's like Bianca's Devotion is like the one screaming that is like the biggest like tech, stereotypical tech card. The other one is like Defiance Fest. But then you could also be like, oh, I'm playing Community Center, I'm playing Fennel, I'm playing a, Jet Energy to help with the pivoting, stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff you could do to really help with the versatility. The base skill level needed to pilot this deck, I've got a 7 out of 10. It is definitely not the hardest deck to pilot on its own, like its own skill, understanding your own deck. I think the real difference and the real skill ceiling really comes from understanding the meta, memorizing every count of every potential tech card, of every list, of every deck, knowing every threat to Crustle that could potentially happen is where the difference comes on like great Crustle players or newer Crustle players. I think you need to do a lot of time kind of studying the meta, understanding the meta, learning the counts of different recovery cards, different energy counts, different Pokemon and decks is the make or break between like day 2 with the Crustle, or missing cut, losing a match, winning a challenge, winning a cup, making cut at a cup, whatever your goal is, you could definitely do it with Crustle. I think it just takes the higher level at which you understand the meta, the better at which you'll see your Crustle gameplay. And I think that's really where the base skill level comes down to. The overall rating, 6.7 out of 10, man. That rating is just all of these numbers divided by 7 because there's 7 of them. It's solid, dude. 6.7 out of 10 is a solid meta ranking. And you got to remember, this is just tanked by its power level. I mean, you're not swinging for much damage at any one point. So, if you fix that power level, maybe you play some Monkey Dories, maybe that power level in your own mind goes up. Now you're looking at over a 7 easily on this deck. So, definitely a strong deck. Definitely think it's one worth playing. And of course, that's going to wrap it up for today's masterclass on Crustle. I hope you enjoyed this masterclass. I hope you learned something new. I hope this brought some more insight into your own Crustle gameplay. Of course, if you're watching this on the Draw Pass channel, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers at the time of this video's uploading. And if you're watching from my channel, this video's up a day later on the Draw Pass channel. So if you saw it there, no, it's not copyright. I made this video. I run both channels. I posted it to both channels constantly. I just posted it on Draw Passes first because I want to try to get that channel over 1,000 subscribers. And if you're watching from mine, go subscribe over there. And of course, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Can't wait to see you guys on the next stream, next video, whatever it is. Maybe in person at Toronto. Hope to see you there. Definitely say hi, what's up. And let me know what videos you guys want to see next on either channel. With that being said, hope everyone's doing amazing. Stay epic. Peace.